everybody, welcome back to my channel. My name is Zara and today I am going to be doing a quick review of Priest of Bones by Peter McLean. This is the first book in the War for the Rose Throne series. It is a quartet and it is complete. I've had this series on my radar for quite a while because it's often sold as the fantasy version of The Peaky Blinders. The Peaky Blinders is one of my favourite TV shows of all time. It's really well written. It's just a very well done show. Everything from the writing to the characters to the costumes to the music, it just all works for the vibe that it's giving off. And so I was really intrigued about this book because I've never seen or read the vibe from Peaky Blinders ever be kind of replicated in a fantasy book. So I was curious, and when I picked it up, I buddy read it with a friend of mine, Tim, and we both had very similar experiences. It's one of those books, and I have a feeling the whole series is going to be like this, where you kind of get lost in it, and like in the best way possible. You kind of go along on the ride with the characters. It doesn't take itself too seriously, and it's just a fun time. Like, it's just a really, really fun time. I did have a few minor issues with it, but I'll come on to those later. So let's get started into the things that I liked. I really like the writing style. I think Peter McLean writes very cleanly. His writing is very clean. He doesn't overdo it. He doesn't try to use long, big words. He's just wants to say what he wants to say, gets on with it, and exits the room. And that's kind of what you want sometimes, and I really appreciated that. I think a lot of fantasy can be very descriptive, very flowery, very over the top, and it doesn't always need to be like that. And he got the balance perfect for this book. The next thing to add on to the writing is the way that he paced the book. I really like the pacing of this story. It's a 320 page book or something. It's very easy to get through. It's very quick to read. All the books are around the same length. I think the longest book is about 360 pages, which is not that long in the grand scheme of things. And so he's kind of figured out a great way to tell a contained story, at least in this first book, and I'm assuming for the next 3 books as well. It's one of those series that I think is best read kind of in between longer books, heavier books that you might be reading. Because like I said, when you combine the fast-paced nature of it with the clean writing, it's just a dream to read. Like, it's so easy to read. I think I read this in like 3 or 4 days, which right now I would say my average time for reading a book is kind of anywhere between like 5 to 7 days. So it's taken me a little bit longer just because I have less time to read. And this book was shorter, to be fair, but I would say that book, with the size it is and the font that it is, probably would have taken me about 4 or 5 days, but I actually read it like in a few days shorter than that. So I take that as like a really positive sign, and it was just really easy to get through. The next thing we're going to talk about is the characters. I think there's some really great characters in this book. I have to say, my favourite character is not actually the main character. My favourite character is one of the main side characters, and her name is Bloody Anne. She's fantastic. She is the right hand to our main character, Thomas Piety, and I just think she's got a really compelling backstory that we're only really scratching the surface of, and I can't wait to delve more into her character as the books develop. There's some mystery surrounding her, and I don't know whether this is just me, but there's something that we're lacking from her character at the moment, and I think it's very much an intentional choice on McLean's part. So I'm very excited to see that potentially reveal itself, unless I'm completely making something up. But I really like the strong female character trope when it's done well, and I think a lot of the times in fantasy it's not done well. And the reason why I think he's done it well is because she actually has quite a lot of vulnerability, and we see her be vulnerable with Thomas. And I love their relationship for that reason. Some of my favourite scenes were just scenes of them two talking to each other about things that had happened. And I just loved getting his insight and her insight. But they're both very vulnerable to each other, not in a romantic way, but like in a completely platonic way, in almost like a familial way. And I loved how he represented that. Thomas Piety is also a very intriguing character. He is pretty much a carbon copy of Tommy Shelby from Peaky Blinders. I do find it really funny that he did actually call the main character Thomas, and our main character in Peaky Blinders is also Thomas, even though most people call him Tommy. But I just thought that was pretty bold, and I have to say, like, I think it was an interesting take on Tommy Shelby. I think he's the type of leader that tries to be, you know, he tries to kind of implement his vision whilst also being very fair and protective of the people that are working with him and under him. And I respect that. I like that type of leader type. and I think he represented it really well. There are a bunch of other characters as well. I think there's a really interesting secondary cast of characters overall. The other character that I really liked is Billy. So Billy is the one of the other secondary characters that I really liked, and I have a feeling he's going to play a much bigger role in the coming books, is Billy. And Billy is, at this point in time, one of the only characters to have magical abilities, and we don't really know much about the magic in this world at the moment. It is very much present, but it seems to be quite rare, and people do seem to fear it quite a lot. Like Bloody Anne hates magic, as an example. But Billy is kind of discovering his powers, and it's really intriguing to see him kind of grapple with that and see the effect that that has on him as well, kind of mentally and physically. So I'm really hoping that we get to explore this more in the next book, because that is actually like my favorite part of the book at the moment. Not all the Peaky Blinders references, it's like specifically the magic, because it seems quite unique, and I'm curious to see how Billy's powers like expand and grow as he learns as well. So I hope we get more of that coming, and I hope that becomes a more dominant focus of the book rather than all of the other stuff that's happening around it. The other thing that I really like this book is that there is quite a lot of politics and kind of scheming going on. I would say there's actually tons of politics. There's more scheming, I would say. There's lots of kind of plans within plans, and people trying to upend each other, and gangs fighting against each other. And it's just fun. Like, it's really well executed. I kind of want to see it on a slightly larger scale in the next book, but I don't know whether that's going to happen, but I really hope it does. But so far, I'm quite liking the direction that it's going in, and I just hope we get to see more of it. In terms of thematic work, I think there's some pretty interesting themes around like war and the impact of war on not only people, but also like societies and communities. There's also some really interesting stuff about like family dynamics, found family, about kind of building relationships for the greater cause. There's also some really interesting thematic work about kind of societal inequalities as well, which is quite a big theme in the TV show too. So there's some really interesting thematic work. I would say it's very surface level at the moment, but I'm hoping that we get to see more of that coming in the series. There is one scene in this book where we find out something that's happened to one of the characters, and I have to say that was definitely a scene where I just kind of had to stop for a second, because it was very... I don't know what the right word is for it. It was intense. It was very emotional. And that is kind of one word of warning that I have for people who don't like grimdark or dark fantasy. Like, it does get pretty dark in places. There's a undercurrent of things happening that we don't fully understand at the moment. And I have a feeling it's just going to get darker as the books go on. So just be aware of that going into it. Now, this brings me onto the things that I had maybe a kind of issues with. I think the first thing is how similar it is to the TV series. I really hope that it starts to go in its own direction, especially if there's going to be more of the focus on the magic in the coming books. It's not that I don't like it, it's just that I'd like the author to kind of add his own spin to it, which I guess he's kind of doing with the magic, but I'd just like to see more of that. So here's hoping that it really does kind of take on a life force of its own and that it works for the story. The other kind of added aspect of that is that I really just hope we get to explore the magic more, and I hope we really get to delve into it and see kind of the inner workings of it, because I love a good magic system, and this magic system has me very intrigued and I want to know more, and I hope McLean gives that to us. The final thing that I will make a comment on, and I didn't really like this and it did kind of impact some of my reading experience, is that the author can be quite repetitive with certain phrases. So Thomas will say something like, I don't know, I always look after my men, you know, and then like 2 pages later he'll say the same thing again, and then 5 pages later he'll say the same thing again, and 20 pages later he'll say the same thing again. It's like, we get it, you love your men, you care about them, you want to help them, you don't have to keep telling us, we know that now. It happened more in the start to kind of towards the end, but I did notice like in the last like 20-30% it happened a lot less. And I have a feeling it's probably not going to happen as much in the coming books, because we've already got the context of the world. We're in Thomas's head already, and so we are, you know, naturally quite in tune with him by now. I'm just hoping that that was kind of like a one-time thing and it won't be an issue in the coming books, because otherwise I can see that getting boring very quickly. So I gave this book 4 stars. It's a really solid start to the series. It's a fun time. I think it's a really good grimdark book for when you're needing something a bit shorter and a bit quicker and a bit more fast paced, and it's just, you know, you don't have to think too hard, but it's fun at the same time. And yeah, I really liked it. I'll probably be starting the second book at some point this year. I'd actually really like to finish the series this year, because then that'll be another one to tick off the list. But yeah, I really liked it. Let me know down below if you've read this book, and let me know if you kind of have any thoughts on the broader series as a whole. And I'll see you down in the comments. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. Every little helps. Thanks for watching. Stay safe, take care, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.